Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Easy English Spark channel. I'm beyond excited to have you here today. Whether you're in New York, Spain, or right at home, I hope you're all feeling fantastic and ready to take your English listening and speaking skills to new heights. This journey is all about embracing new experiences, building your confidence, and becoming fluent in English like never before. Let's get started and spark up your English journey from home to the world. Chapter 1. A Dream of Something Bigger. My name is Selena, and I'm from a small town near Barcelona, Spain. I grew up in a cozy little house, surrounded by my family, my parents, my younger brother, and the beautiful landscapes of the countryside. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. I had a close-knit group of friends, a loving family, and a life that many people would envy. Yet, deep down, I felt like something was missing. I wasn't just content with the life I had. I had bigger dreams, dreams that stretched far beyond the small town where I had spent my whole life. I loved my home. I loved the familiar faces, and I loved the quiet, peaceful days. But for as long as I could remember, I had always dreamed of something more. I wanted to see the world, meet people from different cultures, and explore the vast opportunities that the world had to offer. And to do that, I knew I needed to learn English. It wasn't just about speaking another language. For me, learning English was about opening doors. Doors to new experiences, doors to new possibilities, and doors to the world. I realized that to make my dream come true, I had to step out of my comfort zone. I had to leave behind the familiar and take a leap into the unknown. For years, I had been studying English in school, and while I knew some basic phrases and words, I wasn't confident enough to have a real conversation. I wanted to speak fluently, to understand every word, every nuance, and to express myself freely in English. I knew that in order to truly learn the language, I had to immerse myself in an environment where English was the heart of everything. So, after a lot of thinking, I made the decision. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt right. I would leave everything behind, my family, my friends, and my hometown, and move to New York City. It was a big step, and it was scary. New York, with its massive skyscrapers, fast pace, and thousands of people from all over the world, felt so different from my quiet life in Spain. But that was the point. It was time to challenge myself, to grow, and to experience something bigger. Talked to my parents about it. My mother, who was always so protective, didn't take the news very well. "Selena," she said, her voice filled with worry, "New York is a huge city. You don't know anyone there. It's dangerous. And your English isn't perfect yet. How will you manage to communicate with all those people?" Her concern was understandable. Leaving home to go to a place where I had no connections, no safety net, was daunting. but my mind was made up. I wasn't going to let fear hold me back. I had to follow my dreams, and this was the only way to truly improve my English and start a new chapter in my life. "I'll be fine," I reassured her. "I've been studying English for years, and I'm determined to get better. I know this is the right step for me. I want to live in a place where I can hear English everywhere, all the time. I need to be surrounded by it, so it becomes second nature." My mother, though hesitant, hugged me tightly. "I just want you to be safe," she said softly, her love and concern clear in her eyes. "But if this is what you want, then I support you." With that, I started preparing for my journey. I sold some of my old things, packed my suitcase, and began saving every penny I could. I worked part-time at a local cafe, serving customers with a smile while practicing my English with anyone who would listen. Every day I made progress, even if it was small. I watched English movies, listened to English podcasts, and read books in English. Slowly, I could feel my confidence building. Finally, after months of hard work, I had enough money saved up. I booked my flight, and before I knew it, I was saying goodbye to my family, my friends, and the only life I had ever known. As I stood in the airport waiting to board my flight to New York, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and fear. I was about to step into the unknown, to take a leap into a new world where everything would be different. But I also knew that this was what I had always wanted. I was chasing my dreams, and no matter what happened, I wasn't going to turn back. And so, with a deep breath, I boarded the plane, ready for the adventure that lay ahead. Chapter 2. The big decision. It wasn't an easy decision. In fact, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had always known that I wanted more from life, that I had to take a step beyond the boundaries of my small town. But making the leap to New York City, the city of dreams, felt like something out of a movie, something so big and bold, and yet something I felt I could never truly achieve. But when I decided to follow my heart, to leave everything behind and chase my dream of learning English, it wasn't just about moving to a new city. It was about everything I had known so far, and everything I was willing to leave behind. I had always been a dreamer. Since I was a child, I would often find myself staring at the stars, thinking about the world beyond my town. I had a deep curiosity, a thirst for adventure. But at the same time, I also had a deep love for my family, my friends, and the small life I had built for myself. That's what made this decision so difficult. My family was everything to me. My parents had always been there, supporting me, guiding me through every decision. My mother, especially, had always been protective. She was the one who made sure I was safe, who helped me through tough times, and who offered comfort when I was sad or scared. And now, as I was about to leave for New York, she was the one who was the most worried. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one evening, the soft light of the lamp above casting a warm glow on everything around us. The smell of my mother's cooking filled the air as she served us dinner, a meal I had enjoyed for years. But tonight something felt different. My mind wasn't on the meal or the cozy atmosphere in our home. It was on what was about to happen, the change I was about to make. You've really thought this through, haven't you? My mother's voice broke the silence, pulling me back into the moment. I nodded slowly. Yes, Mom. I really have. I'm ready. She set her fork down and looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. But New York, Selena, it's such a big city. You don't know anyone there. It's dangerous. And your English isn't perfect yet. How will you manage? What if you can't make it there? I could hear the worry in her voice. I knew she didn't want to lose me, and I knew she wasn't sure if I could handle being so far away. But at that moment, I also realized that I had to do this for myself. This wasn't about my family or my friends. This was about me, about pursuing something that had been in my heart for as long as I could remember. I wasn't just going to be Selena from a small town anymore. I was going to be someone who could stand on her own, who could face challenges and come out stronger on the other side. I've been thinking about this for so long, Mom, I said, my voice steady. I need to do this. I need to go to New York to immerse myself in English, to learn in the place where the language is alive. It's not just about the language. It's about becoming someone more. I know it's scary. I know it's a huge step. But I have to try. My mother's face softened as she listened. She was torn. She loved me deeply, and the idea of me being so far away filled her with a mix of pride and fear. I understand, Selena, she said quietly, but promise me one thing. Promise me that you'll be careful. Promise me that you'll stay in touch, that you'll let us know you're okay. I could see the concern in her eyes and it made my heart ache, but at the same time, I knew that this was the moment when I had to leave behind the safety net of home and take the first step into a bigger world. I promise, Mom, I'll stay in touch. I won't forget where I came from, and I'll never stop thinking of you. I reached across the table and took her hand. This is just the beginning. I'm not going forever. I'm just going to make my dreams come. True, she nodded, squeezing my hand. I know, Selena, and I want you to succeed. I really do. But remember, no matter how far away you are, you'll always have a home here with us. Those words meant more to me than anything else. It was her way of letting go, even though it hurt. It was her way of trusting that I would make it. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. I packed my bags, said my goodbyes, and tried to wrap my mind around the fact that my life was about to change completely. I spent time with my friends, relishing the familiar comfort of their company, knowing that this would be the last time I'd see them for a long while. It was bittersweet. I didn't want to leave them behind, but I knew this was the path I had to follow. I saved every penny I could. I worked extra hours at my part-time job, helping out at a local bookstore. Every day felt like a countdown to my departure. I kept telling myself that this was the right decision, that I was doing what was best for my future. But as the days passed, the fear crept in. What if I couldn't handle it? What if New York was too much for me? I had no idea what to expect. But as the days grew shorter and my departure neared, I knew deep down that there was no turning back. I had made up my mind, and I had to follow through. The excitement and fear began to build inside me, and in that mix, I found my courage. I walked around my town one last time, soaking in the sights and sounds that had always been so familiar to me. The quiet streets, the gentle rustling of the leaves in the breeze, the shops that had been part of my life for as long as I could remember. And then it hit me. This was the last time I would walk these streets for a long time. It was time. Time to make that big decision. Time to leave the comfort of the life I had known and step into something bigger, something brighter, something that would shape me in ways I couldn't even imagine. And with that, I took a deep breath, gathered my things, and said goodbye. I was ready. New York was calling, and I was finally ready to answer. Chapter 3. Goodbye to Familiar Faces. The days leading up to my departure felt like they were moving faster than I could process. I had made the decision to go to New York, but now, as the departure date loomed closer, I was hit with a wave of emotions that I hadn't anticipated. There were moments when excitement would surge through me, followed by moments of doubt, when I'd ask myself if I was really ready for what was ahead. The hardest part of all of this, though, was saying goodbye to everyone I had known, my family, my friends, my life. I had always been close to my parents, especially my mother, and I knew this change was going to affect them deeply. My younger brother, always the one to make me laugh and lighten the mood, didn't quite understand the magnitude of my move. To him, I was just going on an adventure, like one of those stories we had read about in books. But for my parents, this was a turning point, and for me, it felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into the unknown. I spent my last few days at home soaking in the familiar sights, the ones I had seen 1,000 times but never fully appreciated until now. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees, the smell of fresh bread baking from the local bakery, the way the sun would shine through the windows in the afternoon. These small, everyday things had always been a part of my world, and now they were all about to become memories, things I would think about when I was far away. The hardest part, though, was seeing my mother. She had always been my rock, the one I turned to when I was scared or unsure, and now she was the one who had to let go. I could see the worry in her eyes as the day of my departure drew nearer. It was unspoken, but clear. She didn't want me to leave, but she also knew this was something I had to do. I remember the morning I was supposed to leave. My suitcase was packed, sitting by the door, ready to go. My flight was in a few hours, but before I left, I needed to say my final goodbyes. My heart was heavy as I went to my parents' room, where my mother sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped together in her lap. She looked up as I entered, and for a moment, we just stared at each other in silence. "Selena," she finally said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "You're really going, aren't you?" I nodded, trying to hold back the tears. "Yes, Mom, I'm going." She stood up and came toward me, pulling me into a tight hug. For a moment, it felt like time stood still. I could feel her warmth, the familiar scent of her perfume, and the comfort of her embrace. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "But I'm going to miss you so much. I don't want you to go, but I know this is your dream. Just promise me one thing. Promise me you'll take care of yourself. And that you'll stay in touch, okay?" "I promise, Mom," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'll call you every week, and I'll keep you updated on everything. You'll always know what's going on with me." She pulled back slightly, looking me in the eyes, her face full of love and concern. "I know you'll do great. You've always been strong and I believe in you. Just don't forget about home, okay?" "I won't forget. I promise. I'll always remember where I came from," I said, trying to smile, though the lump in my throat made it hard to speak. We stood there for a few more moments, just holding each other, not wanting to let go. And then it was time. I knew I had to leave. I went to my brother's room next. He was sitting on his bed, playing a video game, completely unaware of the storm of emotions I was going through. When I walked in, he looked up and gave me a big grin. "You're really leaving, huh?" he said, as if it wasn't a big deal. To him, it wasn't. To him, I was just going to another city, another adventure. "Yeah, I am," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. "You're going to miss me, huh?" He shrugged, giving me that typical teenage look. "Nah, I'll be fine. You'll be back before I know it, but don't forget to bring me something cool from New York." I laughed, relieved that he wasn't as emotional as I was. "I'll bring you something, promise." "Good," he said, tossing his controller aside and standing up. He gave me a quick hug, his way of showing affection without making it too sentimental. "Take care of yourself, and don't forget to text me every once in a while, all right?" "I won't forget," I said, hugging him back. "Take care of everything here while I'm gone. Don't cause too much trouble." He smiled, then looked at me with a more serious expression. "I know you'll do great, Selena. You've got this." With that, he turned back to his video game, as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything was changing. This was it, the moment when I had to step into the world beyond what I knew, beyond the comfort of my family and friends, and into the unknown. The car ride to the airport was quiet, except for the occasional sound of the radio in the background. My mother sat beside me, her hand resting on mine, and my father drove. The landscape outside the window blurred as I thought about all the goodbyes I had just said. My heart was heavy, but I knew that this was the path I had chosen. At the airport, the reality of the situation hit me all at once. There was a lot of waiting, a lot of time spent saying goodbye. My family and I stood in front of the security checkpoint, and it felt like time was moving too quickly, like I hadn't had enough time to process everything. "I'm going to miss you so much," my mother said once more, her eyes filled with tears. "I'll miss you too, Mom," I said, feeling tears well up in my own eyes. With one final hug, I turned and walked away, each step feeling heavier than the last. The airport seemed to grow larger the further I walked. I couldn't help but look back once more, seeing my family standing there, waving goodbye. And then I was through the gates, moving forward to a new chapter in my life. As I walked toward the plane, I knew that I wasn't just leaving behind a place. I was leaving behind a version of myself. But I also knew that I was going to come back stronger, more confident, and ready to face whatever life threw at me. I was saying goodbye to the familiar, but I was about to step into a world full of new possibilities. And with that thought, I boarded the plane, ready to take off toward my new life in New York. Chapter 4. Arrival in the City of Dreams. The plane ride felt like it took forever. Every minute stretched on, and I couldn't help but replay the events of the past few days in my head. Saying goodbye to my family, stepping into a new chapter of my life. All of it felt like a dream. As the plane flew higher and higher, I looked out the window, watching the clouds roll by and wondering what awaited me at the end of this journey. Was I ready for New York? For the challenges, the fast pace, the people I would meet? When the announcement came over the loudspeaker, telling us we were about to land in New York, a wave of excitement washed over me. The moment I had been waiting for was finally here. I was about to set foot in the city I had dreamed about for so long, the city that never sleeps, where the streets were filled with the sounds of 1,000 different languages, where dreams were made and broken in the blink of an eye. As the plane began its descent, my stomach churned with a mix of nerves and excitement. I tried to look out the window, but all I could see were clouds, thick and white. It wasn't until the plane broke through the clouds that I saw it. The city. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. Skyscrapers that seemed to touch the sky, the grid of streets stretching out in every direction, and the river cutting through the heart of it all. New York, the city of dreams, was finally in front of me. The plane touched down with a sudden jolt, and I could feel my heart beating faster in my chest. We had arrived. I was here, in New York, standing at the beginning of everything I had imagined. The doors opened, and I stepped off the plane, taking my first steps on American soil. The air felt different, thicker, buzzing with energy. The city seemed alive, and I could already feel its pulse under my feet. The airport was bustling, as expected. There were people everywhere, some rushing to their gates, others chatting in groups, some on their phones, and many speaking in languages I didn't recognize. I was surrounded by so much noise and movement, and yet I felt strangely alone. My eyes scanned the crowd, looking for any familiar faces, but there were none. This was it, the beginning of my adventure in a city where I knew no one, where everything was unfamiliar. I walked through the airport trying to keep my nerves under control. My hands were shaking slightly as I reached for my phone to check the address of the hotel I had booked. I had everything planned, but in the chaos of the airport, it didn't feel like enough. I glanced at the signs directing people to baggage claim and headed in that direction, trying to make sense of the flow of people moving around me. My mind was spinning with thoughts. Where do I go next? What if I get lost? What if something goes wrong? Finally, I reached the baggage claim area. I picked up my suitcase, which seemed so much heavier now that I was carrying it through the maze of strangers. I tried to breathe deeply, taking in the scent of the airport, the mix of coffee, perfume, and the faint hint of airplane fuel. It was all so new, and I was a little overwhelmed by it all. Once I had my suitcase, I followed the signs to the exit. There were so many people, so much movement around me, and I felt a little lost. But I reminded myself that I had to keep going. This was what I had come for. This was the city where dreams were made, where I would learn English, where I would find my place in the world. I couldn't let the unfamiliarity stop me now. And then, as I stepped through the exit doors, I saw them, the yellow taxis. I had heard so much about them, the iconic, bright yellow cars that whisked people through the streets of New York. They were lined up, waiting for passengers, their lights flashing in the dim light of the evening. I had read about them in books and seen them in movies, but seeing them in real life felt like a small victory. I was finally here, and I was going to make it. I walked up to one of the taxis, my heart racing with excitement and nerves. The driver, a middle-aged man with glasses and a friendly smile, turned to look at me through the rearview mirror. "Where to?" he asked, his accent strong and his voice a bit gruff. I swallowed hard. "This is it. Time to speak English." To the hotel," I said, my voice shaking slightly as I handed him the address written on a piece of paper. I could feel his eyes on me as I fumbled to say the name of the hotel correctly. I tried not to let the nerves get the best of me, but my mind was racing. What if he doesn't understand me? What if I say it wrong? He nodded, and without saying another word, he started driving. I sat back in the seat, looking out the window as the city began to unfold before me. The streets were crowded, even at this late hour, and the buildings were tall, towering over, the street like giants. The lights from the billboards, the street lights, and the cars seemed to shimmer in the night, giving the whole city a glowing, almost magical feel. It was like nothing I had ever seen before, and I couldn't help but stare in awe. As the cab moved through the streets, I couldn't help but think about how different everything was. The people, the sounds, the language, it was all so new. I was in a place where everyone was speaking in English, and every conversation felt like a challenge. The street signs were different. The way people moved was different. Even the air smelled different. It was overwhelming. And yet it was exactly what I had wanted. I was here. I was in New York, and everything about this city was pushing me to grow, to face new challenges, to be brave. I reminded myself of why I was here. I had come to learn English, to be immersed in the language, to live in a place where I could practice every single day. As the taxi turned onto another street, I could see the glowing lights of Times Square. In the distance, I had seen it in movies, but seeing it in person was like stepping into a different world. The lights were so bright, so vibrant, it almost felt like daytime. People were everywhere, walking quickly, talking, laughing, and hurrying toward their destinations. It was chaos, but it was exciting chaos. The city felt alive, like it had a pulse that I could feel in my chest. When we finally arrived at the hotel, I paid the driver and stepped out of the taxi. I looked up at the building, a small, modest hotel compared to the towering skyscrapers around it. But to me, it felt like the beginning of everything. It was my new home, at least for now. Inside the hotel, the receptionist greeted me with a quick smile and asked for my passport. I handed it over, my hands still shaking. She quickly checked me in, and before I knew it, she handed me my room key. "Your room is on the 3rd floor," she said in a rapid-fire English that I struggled to keep up with. But I nodded, trying my best to understand. "Enjoy your stay." "Thank you," I said, my voice a little hesitant but clear enough. I was relieved that I had been able to communicate. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, feeling a sense of both excitement and nervousness swirling inside me. When I entered my room, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The room was small, but it was mine. It had a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto the busy street below. I sat on the bed for a moment, just taking it all in. The reality of the situation. I had made it. I was here. But even as I sat there, I couldn't help but think about what came next. Tomorrow I would go to my new school. I would meet my teachers and classmates. I would be surrounded by people who spoke English fluently, and I had to find a way to keep up. I felt a little scared, a little uncertain. What if I didn't understand them? What if I couldn't keep up with the lessons? But in that moment, I knew something important. I had come this far, and there was no turning back. This was my chance, my dream, and I was going to make the most of it. And so, as the lights of the city twinkled outside my window, I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "I'm ready." Tomorrow would be the beginning of the rest of my life in this incredible city. Chapter 5. First day in the big city. I woke up early the next morning, the city sounds of New York already buzzing outside my window. It was a strange feeling, knowing that I was finally here, living my dream, and yet everything still felt so new, so unfamiliar. The excitement I had felt the night before was still there, but it was now mixed with a growing sense of anxiety. Today was the first real day in the city. Today, I was going to see what life was really like in New York. I was going to my new school, meeting my classmates and teachers, and stepping into a world where English was spoken all around me. I had prepared for this moment for so long, but now that it was here, I felt like I was standing at the edge of something huge, something I wasn't sure I was fully ready for. I got dressed quickly, trying to push aside the nervousness in my stomach. The weather was crisp, and I pulled on my jacket as I stared at myself in the mirror for a moment. This was it. No more doubts, no more hesitations. I was going to make it. I left my hotel room and walked down the narrow hallway to the elevator. The hotel was small, but it felt like my safe place in the middle of this giant, unfamiliar city. As the elevator descended to the lobby, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that this was what I had come for. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and I stepped into the lobby, where the receptionist greeted me with a smile. She asked me if I was ready for my first day, and I nodded, trying to hide the nervousness that was creeping up inside me. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." I stepped outside into the bustling streets of New York. The moment I did, I was hit with the full force of the city's energy. Cars honked, people rushed by, and the sidewalks were crowded with people of all different walks of life. There were so many languages being spoken, so many different cultures colliding in every corner. It was exactly what I had imagined: vibrant, loud, and alive. I stood for a moment, unsure of where to go. The street names seemed so unfamiliar, and the map on my phone was blurry in my hands. "Okay, Selena, just breathe," I thought to myself. "You can do this." I checked the address of my school again. It was about 20 minutes away by bus. I could take the bus there, like I had practiced in my mind 100 times. I pulled up Google Maps and started walking toward the bus stop. The streets were busy with people hustling from one place to another. I tried to follow the directions on my phone, but the crowds were thick, and everything felt like it was moving too fast. I felt a little overwhelmed by the sheer volume of people, the noise, the movement. But I reminded myself, this is New York. This is what you came for. After a few minutes, I finally found the bus stop. I stood there waiting for the bus, trying to calm my nerves. People came and went, all of them seeming to know exactly where they were going. And there I was, a little lost, trying to figure it all out. The bus pulled up, and I stepped inside, feeling a wave of uncertainty wash over me. There were so many people on the bus, and the bus driver was speaking quickly in English, telling everyone where to sit. I barely understood everything he said, but I just nodded along, finding a seat near the window. As the bus started moving, I couldn't help but stare out the window, watching New York pass by. The streets, the buildings, the people, everything was so different. I felt like a small fish in a big, wide ocean, trying to navigate a world that was so much bigger than anything I had ever known. But at the same time, I felt this tiny spark of excitement. I was here. I was living this experience, and no matter how overwhelming it was, I knew that I was where I was supposed to be. The bus ride took longer than I expected, and I was starting to feel nervous. What if I'm late? What if I get lost? The thoughts raced through my mind, but I pushed them aside. I had to stay calm. I couldn't let my fear control me. Finally, the bus stopped near my school. I got off, still feeling a bit disoriented. The school building was much bigger than I had imagined. Tall and imposing with wide glass windows and a huge sign outside. I took a deep breath and walked inside, my heart pounding in my chest. When I entered the lobby, I was greeted by the receptionist, who handed me a map of the building and directed me to the second floor where my class would be. I took the elevator up, my mind racing as I imagined what my first day would be like. What if I don't fit in? What if my English isn't good enough? What if they can't understand me? I tried to push these thoughts out of my mind, but they lingered. The elevator doors opened, and I walked down a long hallway lined with classrooms. I found room 203 and hesitated for a moment before walking inside. The moment I stepped in, I was greeted by the warm smiles of the teacher and my classmates. "Hello," the teacher said, her voice kind and welcoming. "You must be Selena. Welcome to our class. We're so happy to have you." I smiled, a little shy, and nodded. "Yes, I'm Selena. Thank you for having me." The teacher asked me to take a seat, and I found an empty desk near the back. As I sat down, I looked around at the other students. There were people from all over the world: China, Egypt, Brazil, and many other countries. They were all here for the same reason I was: to learn English, to improve, to grow. I could feel my nerves still buzzing inside me, but there was something comforting about being surrounded by people who were also in the same boat. Everyone was here to learn, to push themselves, and I knew I had to do the same. The teacher introduced herself as Miss Johnson, and she spoke slowly and clearly, which made it easier for me to understand. She began by asking everyone to introduce themselves. When it was my turn, my heart skipped a beat. This was my chance to speak, to show that I belonged here. "Hello," I said, my voice shaky but determined. "My name is Selena, and I am from Spain. I came to New York to learn English because I want to improve my speaking skills and experience life in this amazing city." The class smiled at me, and I could feel their warmth, their acceptance. It made me feel a little more at ease. The lesson began, and Miss Johnson started teaching new vocabulary words. She wrote them on the board and explained their meanings. At first, I struggled to keep up, but I listened carefully and tried my best to understand. The other students were doing the same, and we worked together to use the words in sentences. I made mistakes, but I didn't feel judged. Everyone here was in the same process of learning, and I felt like I was part of something bigger. After the lesson, we had a short break, and I chatted with some of my classmates. May, from China, told me about her family and how she was learning English to get a better job. Ahmed from Egypt shared his passion for history, and we talked about the differences between our countries. I listened closely, learning not just about the language but about different cultures, different perspectives. It felt like the world was opening up to me, and I was finally getting a glimpse of it. When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, I felt a sense of accomplishment. It hadn't been easy, and I had struggled at times, but I had survived my first day. I had made it through, and more than that, I had learned. I was on my way. As I left the classroom, I couldn't help but smile. I had done it. My first day in New York was over, and I was one step closer to becoming the person I wanted to be. Tomorrow, I would do it all over again. And each day after that, I would keep pushing myself. This was just the beginning. Chapter 6: A New Beginning. The days following my first day at school passed in a blur of excitement and nervous energy. Every morning, I woke up feeling a little bit more comfortable with the city, and a little bit more certain that this was where I was meant to be. The first few days had been overwhelming, but now, as I entered the second week of my adventure in New York, things began to feel a little more routine. I was adjusting to the flow of life here, learning the rhythms of the city, and, more importantly, starting to see the progress I had been hoping for. I woke up early again on Monday, the morning sunlight filtering through the window of my hotel room. The city outside was already alive, with the distant sounds of honking taxis and the rush of people making their way to work. It was a familiar sound by now, one that had become a part of the backdrop to my life here in New York. I had started to get used to it. I got dressed quickly, as I had learned to do in this fast-paced city. No time to linger, no time to waste. Each moment felt precious here, like a tiny opportunity to grow and learn, and I wasn't about to let any of it slip by. I grabbed a quick breakfast from the small cafe in the lobby, a cup of coffee and a muffin, and made my way to the bus stop. The walk to the bus stop had become more familiar now, and though the streets were still busy, they didn't overwhelm me like they had on my first day. I recognized the landmarks, the little corner shops, and the cafes where people sat on the sidewalks, sipping their morning coffee. New York was no longer a foreign place to me. It was becoming my city. I was finding my way, step by step. When I got on the bus, I felt more confident than I had the previous week. I knew which bus I needed to take. I knew where to get off. I didn't feel like I was in a rush to get to my destination. I wasn't just trying to survive the experience anymore. I was starting to enjoy it. By the time I arrived at school, I was ready for the day ahead. I entered the building and walked up to the second floor, where my class was held. I was starting to feel more at home in these hallways. The familiar hum of voices in different languages filled the air, and the sight of my classmates waiting outside the classroom gave me a sense of belonging. Everyone was in the same boat here. Everyone was trying to learn, to grow, to make the most of their time in this city of opportunity. As I entered the classroom, Miss Johnson greeted me with her usual warmth, and I smiled back, a little more confidently than I had a week ago. "Good morning, Selena," "How are you today?" she asked, her voice bright and welcoming. "I'm doing well, thank you," I replied, my words flowing more smoothly than they had in the past. I was starting to feel more at ease with speaking English, even if I still stumbled over certain words or phrases. I was no longer afraid to make mistakes. I had learned that mistakes were part of the process, part of the journey to improvement. The lesson began, and Miss Johnson introduced us to new vocabulary words. We worked on sentences, practiced pronunciation, and engaged in conversations with one another. I was amazed at how much easier it had become to follow along. The words didn't feel as foreign to me anymore. I could recognize the meanings, and I was starting to form sentences on my own, without having to search for every word. During a break, I talked with May, the girl from China, and Ahmed, the guy from Egypt. We had become friends over the past week, and I found comfort in talking to them. We often shared stories about our countries, about what had brought us to New York, and how we were adjusting to life here. May told me about her job back home and how learning English was going to help her find better opportunities when she returned. Ahmed shared his passion for history and how he hoped to study it further in the U.S. Talking with them made me feel like I wasn't alone in this journey. We were all in the same boat, and it felt good to know that I was surrounded by people who were also striving to improve and succeed. We weren't just classmates. We were companions in this shared experience, all learning together in this city that was so different from our own homes. After class, I decided to explore the city a bit more. I walked through the bustling streets of New York, feeling more comfortable navigating the crowds. I was still amazed by how much was happening around me at all times. Street performers, vendors selling their goods, tourists snapping photos, and locals rushing by, all moving to the rhythm of the city. I decided to stop by a small park I had noticed the day before. It was a quiet spot, tucked away from the busy streets, and I wanted to take a moment to reflect on how far I had come since I arrived. The park was peaceful, with trees lining the pathways and benches scattered throughout. It felt like a little oasis in the middle of the city, a place where I could catch my breath and appreciate the moment. As I sat on one of the benches, I thought about everything that had happened in the past week. I had arrived in New York with nothing but a suitcase, a dream, and a lot of uncertainty. But now, after just a few days, I had started to find my rhythm. I was learning English every day. I was making friends. I was exploring the city, experiencing things I had only seen in pictures before. I was living my dream. I had always known that this would be hard, that there would be days when I felt out of place, when I doubted myself. But today, I felt good. I felt like I was becoming the person I had always wanted to be. Confident, independent, and unafraid to face new challenges. I smiled to myself, sitting back on the bench and watching the people pass by. This was my new beginning. I wasn't just in New York to learn a language. I was here to transform, to grow, to experience the world in a way I never had before. As the day went on, I felt more and more like New York was becoming my home. The city had so much to offer, and I was only just beginning to scratch the surface. There was still so much I wanted to see and do, so many places to visit, so many people to meet. But more than that, there was so much more for me to learn. Not just about English, but about life, about myself, and about the world. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the journey ahead. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to overcome, but I was no longer afraid. I had taken the first steps, and with each day that passed, I was becoming stronger, more confident, and more capable. This was just the beginning of my adventure in New York, and I couldn't wait to see where the next step would take me. Tomorrow, I would go to school again. I would continue learning. I would keep pushing myself. And with each new day, I would grow just a little bit more. Chapter 7. Building New Friendships. The more time I spent in New York, the more I realized that this city wasn't just a place for learning. It was also a place for connection. Every day was a new opportunity to meet people, to form bonds, and to understand the world from different perspectives. It wasn't easy at first. On my first few days at school, I had been shy, nervous, and unsure of how to start conversations. My English was still far from perfect, and I worried that my accent or lack of vocabulary would make it difficult to communicate. But as the days passed, something began to shift inside me. I stopped worrying so much about making mistakes, and instead, I focused on just connecting with others. I realized that everyone at my school was there for the same reason: to improve their language skills, to learn, and to grow. And that common goal created an unspoken bond between us all. One of the first people I connected with was May, a young woman from China. She was in my English class, and at first I had noticed her sitting quietly in the back of the room, much like me. She didn't speak much, but there was something about her calm presence that drew me in. After a few days of exchanging polite smiles in the hallway, I decided to start a conversation with her. I remember the first time I spoke to May outside of class. We were waiting for the elevator after class, and I decided to take the leap. "Hi, May," I said, trying to sound confident, though my voice wavered slightly. "How's your English coming along?" May looked at me and smiled. "It's okay. A little hard, but I try every day." Her voice was soft, and her English wasn't perfect, but it was clear. And in that moment, I felt a connection. We were both in the same boat, navigating the challenges of learning a new language in a city that was both exhilarating and overwhelming. As we began to talk more, I learned that May had moved to New York with her family to seek better job opportunities. Back in China, she had worked in a small cafe, but she wanted something more. She wanted to improve her English so that she could work in a bigger company and explore more opportunities in the international business world. It was a big dream, and one that required a lot of hard work and determination. I admired that about her. We started meeting up after class, usually at a small cafe near the school. There, we would talk about our experiences, share stories about our countries, and help each other with our English. May would teach me a few words in Mandarin, and I would teach her Spanish phrases. It wasn't always easy, especially when we struggled to explain things in our second languages, but it was fun. We laughed a lot, especially when we didn't understand each other perfectly. One day, after a particularly challenging English lesson, May and I walked to a nearby park to relax. The weather was beautiful, and as we sat on a bench, we talked about how far we had come since we first arrived in the city. When I first got here, May said, I couldn't understand anything. Everyone was talking so fast, and I felt like I was lost all the time. But now, it's getting better. I smiled. I feel the same way. It's like each day I understand a little more. I'm not so afraid to make mistakes anymore. We're here to learn, right? May nodded, her eyes brightening. Exactly. And we'll get there, step by step. We sat in silence for a while, just enjoying the peaceful surroundings of the park. I realized then that I had made my first true friend in New York, and it felt like a small victory. May had become my first connection here, and that made me feel a little less alone. But it wasn't just May who helped me build my sense of belonging. Over the next few weeks, I began to meet other students at my school, each with their own unique stories and backgrounds. One of them was Ahmed, a lively and passionate student from Egypt. He had been in New York for a few months before I arrived, and he knew the city well. He was eager to show me around and introduce me to the hidden gems of New York that only a local would know. Ahmed had a sense of humor that made me laugh even when I didn't understand all of his jokes. Selena, he would say, you need to try the best falafel in the city. I will take you to my favorite place, and you will see what real food is. His excitement was infectious, and I found myself looking forward to every outing with him. One Saturday, Ahmed invited May and me to go to a small food festival in Brooklyn. It was a celebration of international cuisine, and Ahmed was determined to introduce us to the best dishes from his home country. We boarded the subway together, making our way to Brooklyn with excited chatter filling the air. The subway ride was a little crowded, but I didn't mind. I felt like I was learning something new with every minute, and having friends to share the experience made it all the more enjoyable. When we arrived, the street was lined with food stalls, each offering a different type of cuisine: tacos from Mexico, kebabs from the Middle East, and yes, falafel from Egypt. Ahmed was in his element, eagerly describing the flavors of each dish and encouraging us to try new things. May and I followed him around, sampling the different foods and laughing at how much we were learning about each other's cultures. "Here, you have to try this," Ahmed insisted, handing me a piece of Egyptian baklava. It was sweet and flaky, with a hint of honey and nuts. I closed my eyes for a moment, savoring the taste. "Wow," I said, my voice full of appreciation. "This is amazing. I've never had anything like it before." Ahmed grinned. "See? Told you, New York is full of surprises." It was moments like these that made me realize how much I was growing, not just as a student of English, but as a person. Every new friendship was teaching me something valuable about language, culture, and the world beyond the borders of my hometown. That evening, after the festival, we walked along the Brooklyn Bridge, taking in the stunning view of the Manhattan skyline. The city glittered in the distance, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for this journey I had embarked on. I had come to New York to learn English, but I had found so much more. I had found friendship, understanding, and a deeper connection to the world. As we walked across the bridge, I looked at May and Ahmed, my new friends, and I felt a sense of peace. We had all come from different corners of the world, but here, in New York, we were united by the same goal: to learn, to grow, and to make the most of the opportunities before us. It was the beginning of something beautiful, and I knew that this was just the start of many more friendships to come. We didn't need to speak the same language perfectly to understand each other. What mattered was the connection we had formed, the bond that was built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and the understanding that we were all here to chase our dreams. As we reached the end of the bridge, we stopped for a moment to take in the view. The lights of the city reflected on the water, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. I was here, in New York, living my dream, and I had found friends who made it even more meaningful. This city was no longer just a place where I was learning English. It was a place where I was building a new life, one friendship at a time. Chapter 8: Overcoming Obstacles. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself slowly adjusting to the rhythm of life in New York. But just as I began to feel a sense of familiarity, something unexpected happened. Something that would test my resolve, push me out of my comfort zone, and force me to confront my fears. I encountered the first real obstacle of my journey. It all started one Friday morning, just after I had finished a long week of school. I had been feeling confident, perhaps too confident. I thought I was finally getting the hang of things, the language, the people, the city itself. My English had improved, I was making friends, and I was starting to understand the fast-paced flow of New York. But I quickly learned that life here wasn't always going to be smooth sailing. It happened during an assignment in class. Miss Johnson had given us a task to work on in groups, and I was paired with 3 other students, May, Ahmed, and Sophia, a student from Brazil. We were assigned to research and present on the cultural differences between New York and our respective home countries. It sounded simple enough, until we started working together. The first few minutes of the group meeting were fine. We discussed the topics we wanted to focus on, divided the work, and agreed to meet again the next day to finalize our presentation. But as the hours passed and we began to delve deeper into the project, it became clear that we had very different ideas about how to approach it. May wanted to focus on the food and customs. Ahmed was passionate about the history and architecture of New York. Sophia was excited to explore the differences in education systems. And I wanted to talk about the pace of life and the differences in communication styles. At first, it seemed like we could all work together by incorporating each of our ideas into the presentation. But the more we discussed, the more it became clear that we were struggling to agree on what to prioritize. Everyone had strong opinions about what was most important, and no one seemed willing to compromise. The conversation grew heated, and what started as a productive discussion quickly turned into a frustrating back and forth. I could feel the frustration building inside me. I didn't want to be the one to speak up, to impose my ideas on the group, but I couldn't sit there quietly anymore. "Guys," I finally said, my voice shaky, "we need to figure this out. If we don't come to an agreement, we'll never finish this presentation." Everyone paused, and for a moment I thought they would brush me off. But then Ahmed spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "I agree with Selena. We need to find a way to bring all of our ideas together. We've been talking for hours, and we're not getting anywhere." I felt a small sense of relief that someone was on my side, but the tension still hung in the air. I realized that I had to step up, that this was my chance to show the group that I could take charge of a situation, that I wasn't just here to learn English, I was here to grow as a person. "Okay, how about this?" I suggested, my voice gaining confidence as I spoke. "Let's each focus on one specific aspect of the topic, but make sure we're all connecting it to the bigger picture. That way, everyone gets to contribute, and we don't lose sight of the main goal." May nodded slowly, and so did Ahmed. "That could work," Ahmed said. "I like that idea. It's a good compromise." Sophia hesitated for a moment, but then smiled. "I agree. Let's do it that way. I felt a sense of pride as we began to work together again. The tension lifted, and the group seemed to come together with a renewed sense of purpose. It was a tough moment, but I had learned something important about myself. I realized that I wasn't afraid to speak up anymore. I wasn't afraid to take charge, even if it meant disagreeing with others or stepping out of my comfort zone. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about finding solutions, about working together, and about learning how to navigate obstacles as they came. The next day, as we stood in front of the class presenting our project, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about the grade or the project itself. It was about what we had achieved as a team. We had faced our differences, overcome our frustrations, and created something meaningful together. As we spoke about the cultural differences between New York and our countries, I realized that the experience had made me stronger, more confident, and more capable of handling challenges in the future. But the obstacles didn't stop there. New York had a way of throwing challenges my way when I least expected it. The following week, I encountered a personal challenge that tested my perseverance in a completely different way. It was a rainy Wednesday afternoon, and I had just finished class when I decided to walk around the city for a bit before heading back to my hotel. I had become more comfortable with navigating the streets, and the thought of exploring a new neighborhood excited me. But as I walked, I suddenly realized that I had wandered too far from the familiar streets near my school. I didn't recognize the area, and my phone was running low on battery. Panic started to rise in my chest. What if I got lost? What if I couldn't find my way back? I stopped walking, trying to calm myself. I remembered something my mother had told me before I left Spain. No matter how far you go, always ask for help if you need it. It was a simple piece of advice, but in that moment, it felt like the key to my survival. I took a deep breath and approached a woman standing by a cafe. She looked up from her phone and smiled as I asked her for directions. "You're not too far from where you need to be," she said kindly, pointing me in the right direction. "Just keep walking straight and you'll see the subway station on your left." Relief washed over me as I thanked her and followed her directions. I realized that I had let my fear take over for a moment, but I had also learned something valuable. In a city as big and fast-paced as New York, it was okay to ask for help. I didn't have to know everything, and I didn't have to do it all on my own. Asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of strength, of knowing when to lean on others and when to trust the world around me. By the time I returned to my hotel that evening, I felt a deep sense of pride. The city had tested me again, but I had overcome it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. I was learning not only the language, but also how to live in this city, how to face challenges head on, and how to believe in myself when things got tough as I sat on the bed that night. I reflected on the obstacles I had overcome in just a few short weeks. Each challenge had taught me something important, something that would help me grow as both a person and a student. I knew that there would be more obstacles ahead, but I was no longer afraid. I had come this far, and I was ready for whatever came next. Tomorrow was another day, another opportunity to learn, to grow, and to push myself even further. Chapter 9: Embracing New Experiences. As the weeks passed in New York, I began to realize something important. My journey here wasn't just about learning English or getting accustomed to a new city. It was about embracing the experiences that came with it, no matter how unfamiliar, intimidating, or exciting they were. The more I allowed myself to embrace the unknown, the more I felt myself growing, both as a person and as a student. One of the things I had come to love about New York was how much it pushed me outside my comfort zone. There was always something new to see, something new to try, and something new to learn. Each day felt like an adventure, and even the smallest moments seemed to carry meaning. One morning, after an especially challenging class, I decided to spend the afternoon exploring a part of the city I had never visited before. I'd heard a lot about the famous neighborhoods in Brooklyn, but I had never actually ventured there. The idea of getting on the subway and traveling to an area I didn't know felt a bit intimidating, but I was determined to break free from the small bubble I had created for myself. I grabbed my backpack, made sure I had my subway card and a map, and set out. The walk to the subway station was familiar now. I had walked this path many times before, but today it felt different, more purposeful. I was going somewhere new, ready to embrace whatever I encountered. The subway ride was bustling as usual. People were reading, talking on their phones, or simply lost in their thoughts. I tried to focus on my journey, not letting the noise and movement distract me. The train hummed along the tracks, and before I knew it, I was in Brooklyn, stepping out of the subway station and into a new world. Brooklyn felt like an entirely different city compared to Manhattan. The streets were quieter, and there was a sense of community in the air. I walked along the tree-lined streets, passing small cafes, vintage shops, and art galleries. The vibe was relaxed but creative. It felt like people here were living at their own pace, not in a rush, not chasing after anything. They were simply enjoying life. I wandered into a small park where a group of musicians was playing on the grass. Their music was beautiful, soft, soulful jazz that floated on the breeze. I found a bench under a tree and sat down, just listening. It felt so peaceful, so different from the noise of Manhattan. In that moment, I realized how much I had been missing by staying in my comfort zone. There was a whole world out there in New York, one that I had only begun to touch. As I sat there, I reflected on how much I had changed since arriving. Just a few months ago, I would have been too scared to venture out on my own like this. I would have stayed in my small, familiar world, never taking the risks that led to new experiences. But now, I was embracing everything. Every subway ride, every new neighborhood, every unfamiliar street corner was a chance to learn something new about the city, about the people, and about myself. That evening, I went to a food market in Brooklyn that I had heard a lot about from my friends. It was bustling with activity, with food stalls offering everything from tacos to dumplings, from pizza to falafel. I was immediately drawn to a stall selling Caribbean food, a cuisine I had never tried before. The smells were intoxicating: spices, herbs, and something sweet that I couldn't quite place. The vendor, a warm-hearted woman with a big smile, recommended a dish called jerk chicken with rice and beans. It was one of her favorites, and she assured me that I'd love it. I hesitated for a moment. This was something completely new to me. I had never tasted Caribbean food before, and I wasn't sure what to expect. But I took a deep breath, smiled back at the vendor, and said, "I'll try it." When she handed me the plate, I could feel my heart racing a little. What if I didn't like it? What if it was too spicy, too unfamiliar? But as soon as I took a bite, I felt a wave of warmth and flavor. The chicken was perfectly cooked, tender, and juicy, and the rice and beans complemented it beautifully. The spices were strong but not overpowering, and I could taste a subtle sweetness that balanced everything perfectly. It was unlike anything I had ever tasted, and I was instantly hooked. I took another bite, this time savoring the flavors. I couldn't help but smile. Here I was, sitting in a food market in Brooklyn, enjoying a dish from a culture completely different from my own. I had stepped out of my comfort zone, embraced something new, and I had loved it. This was what it meant to live in New York, to constantly push myself to try new things, to embrace every experience, no matter how big or small. The next few days were filled with similar experiences. I visited museums, attended a street performance in Central Park, and even went to a local bookshop I had heard about from a friend. Each experience was different, but they all taught me something valuable. I learned how to navigate the subway system with ease, how to interact with people from all over the world, and how to immerse myself in the diverse culture of New York. One of the most surprising experiences came when I decided to join a local volunteer program that helped newcomers to the city. It wasn't something I had planned on doing, but a friend of mine had mentioned it, and I figured it was a great way to meet more people and get involved in the community. The first day I volunteered, I was nervous. What if I didn't understand the people I was helping? What if my English wasn't good enough? But as soon as I arrived, I was greeted by a group of kind, welcoming people who were all excited to be there. I worked with a group of students from all over the world, some from South America, some from Europe, and others from Asia. We helped new arrivals navigate the city, showing them how to use the subway, where to buy groceries, and how to find the best local spots. It was an eye-opening experience. I could see the challenges they were facing, and it reminded me of the struggles I had gone through when I first arrived. But it also made me realize how far I had come. I was no longer the lost, uncertain person I had been when I first stepped off the plane. I had become someone who could help others, someone who was beginning to find her place in this vast city. By the end of the day, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. I had embraced a new experience, one that took me out of my comfort zone and allowed me to connect with others in a meaningful way. The more I opened myself up to the world around me, the more I realized how much I was capable of. I wasn't just surviving in New York, I was thriving. That night, as I walked back to my hotel, I reflected on the day. The city, with all its chaos and beauty, had taught me so much. It had taught me to embrace new experiences, to take risks, and to find joy in the unknown. The more I embraced these experiences, the more I discovered about myself. I had come to New York to learn English, but what I was really learning was how to live fully, how to be present in the moment, and how to embrace the challenges and opportunities that came my way. Tomorrow, I knew, would bring new experiences, new challenges, and new lessons. And I was ready for all of it, because I had learned that the key to thriving in this city, this incredible city of dreams, was to keep embracing everything it had to offer. Chapter 10. Returning Home Changed Forever. The days leading up to my departure from New York felt like a blur. How could it be that my time in this city that had once felt so foreign and overwhelming, was already coming to an end? It felt like just yesterday that I had stepped off the plane, full of fear and excitement, uncertain of what the next chapter of my life would hold. And now, here I was, about to board a plane back to Spain, a different person than the one who had left. New York had been everything I had hoped for, and more. It had challenged me, stretched me, and, in many ways, transformed me. The city had taught me how to navigate the world, not just with my language skills, but with my heart and mind. It had opened my eyes to new cultures, new experiences, and a whole new way of living. The person I was now was no longer just the quiet, reserved girl from Spain who was afraid to speak up. I had become someone stronger, someone who had learned to face challenges head-on, embrace new opportunities, and trust in myself. The final few days in New York were a whirlwind. I spent time visiting my favorite places in the city: Central Park, Times Square, and the Brooklyn Bridge. Each place held memories of the adventures I had experienced, the lessons I had learned, and the friends I had made. It felt surreal to think that I would soon be saying goodbye to this city that had become my home, even if only for a short time. On my last evening, I walked through the streets of Manhattan, soaking in the sounds and sights one last time. The city was alive, as it always was, with people rushing to their destinations, the hum of traffic in the background, and the glow of neon lights reflecting off the buildings. I had come to love this energy, this rhythm of life. It had become a part of me, and I knew that no matter where I went, a piece of New York would always be with me. I met up with May and Ahmed that evening for one final dinner together. We sat at a small restaurant in Greenwich Village, just like we had on our first week here. We had come so far since then, and the conversation flowed easily as we reminisced about our time in the city. May talked about her plans to return to China and start a new career. Ahmed shared his thoughts on studying history in the U.S., and I found myself reflecting on everything I had gained from this experience. I can't believe it's almost over, I said, my voice thick with emotion. It feels like I've only just begun to understand New York and now I have to leave. May nodded. It's hard, isn't it? I've learned so much here, and now it feels like I'm just starting to scratch the surface. Ahmed smiled warmly. But that's the beauty of it. The city never stops. We may be leaving, but New York will keep going. And everything we've learned here, we can take with us. We carry it with us wherever we go. His words stuck with me as we continued our dinner. New York had become a part of me, yes. But it wasn't just the city itself. It was the people, the friendships, the experiences, and the lessons. It was the confidence I had gained, the challenges I had overcome, and the new ways of seeing the world. I wasn't leaving New York behind. I was taking a piece of it with me. The night before I was set to leave, I sat in my hotel room, packing up the last of my things. It felt strange to be putting everything away, knowing that soon I would be leaving this chapter of my life behind. I thought about how much had changed since I first arrived. I had been scared and uncertain, unsure of how I would fit into this giant, fast-paced city. But now, as I closed my suitcase and stood up to look out the window one last time, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had made it. I had survived. More than that, I had thrived. The next morning, I woke up early, the morning sun filtering through the blinds. My flight wasn't until later in the day, but I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the city slowly come to life. The streets below were already filled with people, taxis, and the hustle and bustle that made New York unique. I smiled to myself. I would miss this city, but I knew that the changes it had brought into my life were permanent. As I walked to the airport with my suitcase in tow, I couldn't help but reflect on everything I had learned. The people I had met, the obstacles I had overcome, the new experiences I had embraced. Each of these had shaped me in ways I hadn't even realized. I had learned to be brave, to speak up, to step outside my comfort zone, and most importantly, to trust in myself. I boarded the Yai's plane and settled into my seat. As the plane taxied down the runway, I looked out the window one last time. New York was fading into the distance, but the memories I had made there would stay with me forever. The flight back to Spain was long, and I spent most of the time thinking about what lay ahead. I was returning to my life in Spain, but I wasn't the same person who had left. I had grown, learned, and discovered parts of myself I never knew existed. I felt ready to face whatever challenges awaited me back home. When I finally landed in Spain, I was greeted by my family at the airport. My mother rushed toward me, her face full of joy and relief, and my younger brother was grinning from ear to ear. They asked about my trip, about everything I had done, and I found myself telling them stories about New York, about my friends, and about the experiences that had shaped me. But it wasn't just the stories I told them. It was the way I told them. I realized that the woman standing in front of them was no longer the same quiet, unsure girl who had left months ago. I had confidence now, a new sense of independence, and a belief in myself that I had never had before. I had changed, and I could see it in the way I carried myself, in the way I spoke, in the way I saw the world. As I returned to my old routines, I knew that the person I had become in New York would stay with me forever. The city had taught me valuable lessons about resilience, about pushing through fear, about the power of stepping out of my comfort zone. But more than that, New York had given me a gift. It had given me the courage to embrace life, to seek out new experiences, and to live fully, no matter where I was. I smiled to myself as I unpacked my suitcase that night, knowing that I wasn't leaving the lessons of New York behind. They would travel with me always as I continued on the path of self-discovery, growth, and learning. And as I looked out of my window at the familiar sights of Spain, I realized that I was no longer afraid of what the future might hold. I had returned home, but I was a changed person, stronger, braver, and ready to face whatever came next. Great work today! Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.